no, maybe here you are avoiding interfaces, and those things can be neglected. But according to me, you have to do your regular maintenance check.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any more questions from participant side? I think no more questions in that case. Once again, I will thank Dr. Kesavan for giving very in-depth knowledge in how to design a part or a component for additive manufacturing process. I hope all of them learned a lot, especially that topology optimization thing. Like yesterday, maybe we discussed with some examples only, but whereas today he explained very in-depth level that how to do the topology optimization step by step. Okay, like in a simulation also, when you have to start the simulation, then after making the product, again you have to do a simulation and confirm that that stress concentration area is like reduced or kind of. So I hope now you understand the procedure also how to do effectively. Okay, so if you have any maybe software license one, then please carry on this kind of research. You'll obviously take it to the next level.
Yeah, Dr. Subbu, one more.
Please.
So, audience, if you need any support from us in terms of research or in terms of any other things, please reach out to us. So we'll be happy to help all of you.
Yeah. Yeah. So then with this, I would like to conclude this session. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Kesavan, once again. Yeah,
thank you. Thank you, Dr. Subbu, and thank you all. Okay.
Yeah, so we will meet around 11:15 for the next session. I'll just keep this link live. Okay. I'll just pause the recording for a while.
അടുത്തത് ഗൗരി ശങ്കർ.
Rafi, are you sharing now?
No, I'm just trying to see where it is. Give me a moment.
So you have a share screen option at the bottom.
Yes.
Just click on it.
Yeah.
So you can share either window or complete screen.
Post disabled participant screen sharing. So, Keshav, it seems my.
Oh, okay. Just a minute.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Dr. Subbu?
Yes, Kesavan.
Can you just put him co-host, Subbu?
Oh, so okay. Just a minute.
Can you put Dr. Rafi co-host? Yes.
Dr. Rafi, I made you as a co-host. I hope you can share right now.
Okay.
Can you try?
Yeah, I'll do it now. 1 second.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we're able to see your screen now.
Okay, so you'll be seeing my normal mode, right? I'm not in the presentation mode right now.
It is in normal mode.
Correct.
Okay, let me change to presentation mode and see how it looks like.
Yes. Yeah, now it is fine. Please.
Okay, so you are seeing only my presentation mode. You're not seeing anything outside my screen, right?
Yes, exactly. We are seeing only your presentation mode of presentation.
Okay, and can you see my face as well?
No, I'm just seeing your name in that box.
Oh, okay. 1 second. Then let me escape and go. 1 second. Let me go to Zoom again. Share that video.
Yes, we're able to see you right now.
Okay, now I'll share my screen and then.
Yes, yes. Correct. Now we are able to see both. Yeah, we're able to see both.
Okay, so I'm going to presentation mode now. Okay, I think now you're able to see my screen as well as my video, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Rafi, yeah, thank you. All set to start now.
Okay.
Yeah, nice to see you after a long time. So thanks for
Yeah.
accepting our invite and to deliver the talk in this program. So without further delay, so let me introduce our speaker, Dr. Khalid Rafi. So Dr. Khalid Rafi is the Senior Additive Manufacturing Program Development Lead at ASTM International for AAM Center of Excellence at Singapore. At ASTM is responsible for developing AM education and the workforce development programs and programs on AM certification also. He has over 12 years of experience in additive manufacturing, performing research and training. Dr. Rafi has co-authored over 26 publications in peer-reviewed international journals and has made over 50 presentations in conferences, symposiums, and other trade shows. So he holds a master's and PhD degree in materials and metallurgical engineering from IIT Madras and postdoctoral fellowship in additive manufacturing from University of Louisville, USA, and Nanyang Technical NTU University from Singapore. So with this brief introduction, I welcome Dr. Rafi for this program. Over to you, Dr. Rafi.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Keshavan, for giving a nice introduction. And it's my pleasure to be here today to talk to you about additive manufacturing standards. And my presentation specifically focus on key additive manufacturing standards for aerospace applications. So even though I am mentioning it as aerospace application, doesn't mean that it applies only for aerospace applications, but all the standards I'm going to discuss here could be used for other applications as well. So as Dr. Keshavan mentioned, my name is Khalid Rafi and I'm from ASTM International. My primary responsibilities are to develop education and training programs for additive manufacturing, as well as to do certification programs pertaining to additive manufacturing. And again, my background is on metallurgical materials engineering. So even in additive, I've been working on metal additive manufacturing for more than 12 years. And I've been with ASTM for more than 2 years. And prior to that, I was working for a certification company called UL, where I was leading the additive manufacturing certification programs for UL. So in my today's presentation, what I'm going to do is to give you a brief overview about ASTM, then the key standards that are available right now that can be used for aerospace applications, and some of the gaps existing in additive manufacturing, standardization, and how we are going to close those gaps in general. So I think most of you who are listening to this talk may be aware about ASTM, because if you're a mechanical engineer, it is hard that you ever used any of these ASTM standards. But again, for those who are new to engineering or mechanical engineering or ASTM, I just want to give you a brief introduction about ASTM. So ASTM is 120-year-old international standard development organization, and they develop standards across various industries, starting from oil and gas to food, additive manufacturing, toys, and things like that. So there are over 140 plus technical committees who are working to develop these standards, representing over 150 countries. And all the standardization activities covers more than 90 industry sectors. And even though it is called as ASTM, so previously it was called American Society for Testing and Materials, but they renamed it few years back as ASTM International, just because the kind of standards that ASTM develops is not just used in America alone, but it is used across the globe. So if you can see here, 60% of the revenue for ASTM comes from outside US. And we have published more than 12,800 over standards, again, across different industry sectors, and have MOUs with more than 100 national standard development organizations in various countries. So this is a brief overview about ASTM, and going to ASTM's activities, particularly on additive manufacturing. So ASTM established the first standardization committee for additive manufacturing back in 2009. So it is the oldest and the largest committee for developing standards for additive manufacturing. And this particular committee currently have more than 1,000 members representing various countries and various organizations. And we have developed more than 36 standards which are approved already, and the 77 standards are currently under development. So one of the important aspects of additive manufacturing standardization is that for additive manufacturing alone, ASTM is in collaboration with ISO DEC2021. So ISO DEC2021 is the additive manufacturing standard development committee under ISO. And the committee under ASTM is called ASTM F42. And these two committees are now jointly developing the standard, just to make sure that there is no overlaps, and the kind of expertise available on additive manufacturing was not that enough to have two different standardization activities happening in an international way. So ASTM and ISO, they came into a partnership called PSDO, and according to that partnership agreement, all these standards coming out for additive manufacturing from ISO and ASTM is now going to be a joint standard. So you may see all the standards are now named as ISO/ASTM followed with a number. So that makes these standards more robust and more credible, so that it can be applied to organizations internationally. And in addition to those collaboration with ISO, we also have a strategic relationship with organizations like America Makes, FAA, FDA, DOD, and MMPDS, who are all working towards developing not standards, but programs for additive manufacturing. So we collaborate with those organizations to develop research programs so that we can get the data to support standardization activities. And we also collaborate with other standard development organizations like ASME, AWS, that's American Building Society, SAE, etc., just to make sure that we are not duplicating the things, and all the standardization activities are harmonized. So before going into the details of the standardization activities, the first and the foremost thing that we should understand is that why we need standards. So whenever we talk about additive manufacturing standards or standards in general, it is a dry area. It is not that exciting for people who are doing R&D and new process developments. But when it comes to maturing a technology, or when it comes to industrializing a technology, we all need to be on the same page, or everyone should speak the same language in the industry. Otherwise, we'll end up in a big mess. So particularly, standards are now really important to make sure that this technology is moving forward and can be adopted across various industries, so that you can use standards to make sure that everyone follows the same procedure in performing some activities. So in particular, standards can ensure your process control. It can give you more assurance to your product quality. It can reduce the risk in using this technology, as well as using the products made use of this technology. And when we use a standardized procedure, you can also reduce the cost involved in performing all these activities. And moreover, it facilitates the larger adoption, which means industrialization of this technology. And it can also impart trust and confidence, because additive manufacturing is a new technology, and it became a matured manufacturing technology only in the past couple of years. So people are still skeptical about the outcome of the process, the technology, the quality of the products. So we need to instill confidence on the end users. Otherwise, the technology will not move forward. So standards can help in creating that kind of a trust and confidence in the users who are using this technology. And the final thing is performing a certification and the quality assurance. So ultimately, when you produce a part, it should be approved, or it should be accepted by a certifying organization or a third party or a neutral body to say that this part is good or this product is good. So in order for them to do that, they need some document, they need some guidances in performing that certification. So standard plays a key role in helping these organizations to certify the parts produced using additive manufacturing. So this is the reason why we need standards, even though it is a long process, but we need standards to make sure that all of us are on the same page and all of us are following the same procedure when we produce parts using additive manufacturing. So in order to give you the current status of the standard development part AM, as I said before, ASTM has published more than 36 standards. These numbers will keep on changing on every month. So that's why I put it as 36 plus. Then we have over 77 standards under development. And we categorize the standards into different classifications, like general AM standards, where we talk about additive manufacturing terminology, test methods, safety, etc. And we have application specific standards, which means these are standards specific to an industry, like aerospace, automotive, medical, tooling, etc. Then we have standards talking about feedstocks, because we use a variety of feedstocks in additive manufacturing, and metal powders are one of the key material that we use. So in addition to metal powders, we have polymer filaments, we have resins. So there are standards for using those materials, and the standards are there for process and equipments. Like we use portable fusion, we use the DED processes, we use, as per ASTM standard, there are 7 categories of processes, and there are standards which governs those processes as well. Then finished AM part standard. So ultimately, what we need is a final product that is made by additive manufacturing. So we have standards which focuses mainly on finished AM parts, which includes different post-processing methods, different inspection methods, non-destructive testing, and things like that. So in addition to ISO and ASTM, there are other organizations also focused on developing additive manufacturing standards, again, specifically on their domains. So I'll be touching a little bit upon those organizations as well in the coming slides. So what you're seeing right now is the additive manufacturing standards structure, or we call it as the roadmap for developing additive manufacturing standards in the future. So based on this roadmap developed by ASTM and ISO, we categorize the standards into 3 different levels. The first one is called general standards. Here you can see general top level AM standards, and And the second category is specific to material or a process. And the last category is specialized on AM standard specialized on materials and applications. So if you see here in the first one, you can see terminology, data formats, qualification guidance, safety, inspection methods. So all these things are common for most of these processes, which means you can apply all these standards, no matter you're working on portable fusion or you're working on directed energy deposition. So if you further going down, you can see standards that are material specific, process specific, and part specific. So for different materials, for example, if you talk about ceramic powders, the kind of requirements that we put in for ceramic powders is different from the requirements that we need for polymer powders. So there will be standards talking specifically for those feedstock materials. And so again, within the feedstock materials, we have materials which are specific to its chemistry. For example, we have different alloys. We have metal alloys like titanium, we have internal. So we have standard specifications which provides you the required or properties to be met using these standards. So we have standards on titanium, which talks about the mechanical properties or the chemical composition for parts produced using titanium. Similarly for steel and whatever material that you are going to come up with, there are standards which are under development to tell you the specific properties for those materials. Similarly for different processes. So what you're seeing right now is the different levels of standard development process. And all these standards are not under development. So these standards are developed based on the requirements from the industry. So even though you can see a lot of materials here, ABS, aluminum, nickel-based alloys, nylon, paper, sand, it doesn't mean that there are standards out there for all those things. So these are all standards which you can expect in the future. But this is how the standard roadmap look like for ISO and ASTM in the coming future. And under F42, so F42 is the main committee, and under F42 there are so many subcommittees based on different subject areas. So we have F4201, which talks about test method, different test method that you are used for additive manufacturing, design, material and process, environmental health and safety, application specific data, then strategic planning. So there are different subcommittees under this F42 committee. And what I want to say here is that all these subcommittees are headed by people from industry, research organizations, and academia, because they are the ones who really know what they need in terms of the standard requirements. So they are the ones who lead these activities, lead these standard development activities, so that they can develop standards which are really needed for their requirements. So it's industry driven. It's not, so ASTM or ISO is not developing standard based on their requirement, but it provides a platform for the industry to come together and develop standards so it can be applied across all industry sectors. So when we talk about standards, again, one of the important thing is different applications. So previously, when additive manufacturing was emerging, we were having only a couple of industries like aerospace and medical who were talking about additive manufacturing in a larger scale. But now there are so many other industry sectors who are focused on additive manufacturing for end-use applications. Based on that feedback, ASTM created another subcommittee called F4207 on applications, and this is driven by industry. And we have subcommittees specific to aviation, space flight, medical, transportation, maritime, electronics, construction. So we have 9 different verticals under this application sector. And again, we will add more based on new industry sectors who want to have additive manufacturing standards for their specific requirements. So coming to the aerospace, so the title of this presentation was focused towards aerospace. So let us focus on the aerospace requirements now. So one of the important requirements with aerospace, or one of the nature of the aerospace is that the industry is strictly regulated. It's a highly regulated industry, which means before you put any parts into use, it has to go through multiple requirements. It has to make sure that the parts satisfy all those specified requirements set by the organization or set by the functional requirements of that particular part. So most of the time when we design a part, we use design values for, let's say, for its mechanical properties, for other functional aspects. So you design a part based on these values. So once you design this part, and when you put this for fabrication, there is a high chance that these design values may get affected because of the characteristics of the process. So when you design a particular part and you try to produce that part using, let's say, powder fusion process, and the same part using a directed energy deposition process, the outcome could be different because the influence of these processes on the final properties of the part could be different. So we have to make sure that once you design a part based on some design values, those design values need to remain fixed. So any variation on those design values could affect your part properties. So you have to make sure that you control different elements in your process, no matter whether it is additive manufacturing or any manufacturing for that matter. You have to make sure that you control different elements of that process. For additive manufacturing, you know, some of the main elements are materials. So you have to have a proper material specification. You have the process, you have to have process controls in place, and you have the entire facility. So all these could affect the design values that you set for the part. So you have to make sure that there are enough controls in materials, enough controls for your process, you have enough controls in your facilities where you fabricate this part. Then only you can ensure that your final part also have the actual design value. Now, how you are going to control? As you know, additive manufacturing is a complex process. Everybody should agree that, because it involves design, it involves feedstock, it involves materials and processing, post-processing, part inspection. Then all these things are managed by or controlled by different people. So all these elements need to be controlled. When you do a design, you have to make sure that you design it for its functionality, you design it for its post-processing capability, you design it considering the inspection requirements. So you have to have a lot of considerations when you perform design. Similarly, when it comes to feedstock, you have to have different considerations on the kind of equipment that you use, the number of times you use this material. All those things need to be considered when you perform or manage feedstock. Similarly, on the process, we know that in a powder fusion process there are 100 over variables. So how these variables are controlled. When it comes to post-processing, I think post-processing takes more time than the actual printing process. So there are a lot of possibilities where things may go wrong while we do post-processing. And part inspection. So there are a lot of inspection methods which can be used, but again, you should have a documented procedure that are used in inspecting a part. So there are ample possibilities for things to go wrong at different stages in additive manufacturing. And even though everything is put straight and good, if you apply the same procedure, same step to another machine, you cannot guarantee that you are going to get the same quality across two different machines, because the architecture of the machine will be different, the way in which that machine works, or the way in which they spread the material, all those things will be different, and that could even impact the final quality of your part. So there are a lot of avenues where things may go wrong. So you have to make sure that you have a right process control in place before you produce or before you put a part produced with additive manufacturing for an end-use purpose. So how do you get control? So you have all these different stages, and we know that we need to have control in place. So you can get this control by creating a qualification framework, which means you are qualifying each and every stages of your additive manufacturing process, and you can create a framework to govern that production activities. And this framework should also integrate all elements in the AM value chain. It's not a standalone thing that you just qualify the material and leave other things apart. So you have to make sure that the qualification is performed in every stages of stages in additive manufacturing value chain. And again, there is no singular correct way. There is no specific way that everybody can do qualification. So the qualification requirements varies across different applications, different levels of criticality of your part. For example, the kind of part that you're used for aerospace applications requires high level of quality control as compared to a part that you're using for, let's say, a tooling application. So the level of qualification required is quite different for your aerospace as well as compared to any other industry sectors. So you have to have different levels, different methods of qualification. And before you go for the actual manufacturing, you have to make sure that you have a qualification framework which is properly done and it is enforced so that you are able to produce parts consistently with consistent quality all over the time. Now, how you are going to do that? So how you create a qualification framework? Is it simply like writing something based on what you think? Of course, earlier days, that was the case. You create your own methods, you develop your own internal procedures based on your best practices, and you follow it, make sure that you're getting a final part consistently. So that was the previous way of doing things. And the problem with that is it is quite limited to your organization. But when you demonstrate your capability to someone else, it is quite difficult for you to demonstrate the credibility of your procedure. So the best way is use a document which is publicly available and it is internationally accepted, so that you can use that document as the basis to create your qualification program. So there is where standards can support you. So there are a lot of ISO ASTM standards which are published. You can see different color codings here, and I know that this slide is a bit cluttered, but my intention here is to tell you that there are a lot many standards out there, and you can use these standards to develop your qualification programs. So whatever you are seeing here in blue is currently as working documents, and in purple color, whatever I'm showing in purple color, those are all standards which are already published. So this is a partial list. And as I said, standards are under development, and every 2 months or 3 months, you may be seeing some new standards. So this will be updated quite often. And when it comes to aerospace, there's a specific working group. At this point, it's called Working Group 10 in AM in aerospace application. So there are many standards right now developed under AM in aerospace application. So it's pretty matured, I would say, but at least there is something for you to begin with for your qualification process when you work for aerospace applications. So this is an example of how you can leverage the standards in creating a quality system across your organization, right from the material to the end part. So whatever standard that I've shown previously can be grouped under different buckets and map it with your process. For example, when I talk about feedstock, so here you can see there are few standards under feedstock. And so if you use these standards, or if you refer to these standards, it will be helpful for you to create a qualification process for feedstock. I'll be detailing some of the standards in a later slide, but just to tell you that how these standards can be mapped with your current process chain. Similarly, you can see standards on material properties specific to different alloys. So we have standards talking about property requirements for Ti64 right now, 316L, Inconel 718, Inconel 625. We also have some of the standards under development for aluminum alloys, as well as not aluminum, like we have something for maritime steel and other alloys which are needed for these industrial applications. So you can use these standards to create design allowable. So which means I was talking about the design values in a previous slide, because we need some design values to create a part, to create a product, which can be then produced using the process. So those design values can be obtained from these standards. So these standards will give you a high-level understanding about the material property requirements, the powder characteristics, and things like that. So these standards are the beginning point for you to get those inputs to create design allowables and the required mechanical properties. Then when it comes to design for additive manufacturing, there's a standard which can be used to create the part with some design guidances. And then you can go to qualifying the build and the part. Then you can go for qualify your machines using these standards here. I'll elaborate the standards later, but so you can see a few standards here to show how machines can be qualified. And once machines are qualified, you're going to the part acceptance part, or the post-processing aspect, where you do thermal post-processing. Then you have to do machining, you have to do NDT evaluation, then you have to do final inspection. So this is the process chain that you can see in an additive manufacturing workflow, and all these elements can be qualified by using or with the help of these standards. So here you can see some of the key published standards for aerospace applications. So one is there are a couple of standards like ISO ASTM 52901. This is one of the earliest standard where we talk about the general requirements for a purchased AM part, which means when you reach out to a customer, or when you reach out to a service provider to produce a part, then there's a set of documents that you need to provide them to describe them what you want in terms of the quality of the product, or in terms of the characteristics of the product. Normally what happens is you go to a print house, or you go to a service provider and say that I need to print a particular part. So the requirements that you need to provide differs for different applications and for different parts. So you have to clearly mention what you need to be in that part. Otherwise what happens is you'll be telling the service provider to print a part, at the end of the day you'll be getting something else. So this particular standard will help you to clearly identify what are all your requirements, or what need to be captured when you print a part. Then you have another standard, ISO ASTM 52904, and this standard talks about the requirement that you need to meet when you produce parts for critical applications. And under machine, you have a standard called ISO ASTM 52941. I'll detail this standard later, which talks about testing or accepting a machine for, or a portable machine that can be used for aerospace applications. Then comes the operator certification. It's ISO ASTM 52942, another new standard which is there to certify an operator. And finally, we have this installation qualification. There's another standard called ISO ASTM 52930. So this is the standard for performing different qualification across different levels. Then these are some of the key standards under development. And so you can see here as work WK, which means a work item, which is something under development. And once we complete this number will be changed into a standard specification number. So we have a couple of standards currently under development for feedstock, which talks about how to create a technical specification for metal powders. We have another standard which is there, talks about metal powder feedstock characterization data. So data is another important aspect, how you're going to collect these data and use this data for traceability. Then you have another standard for test, which includes creating miniature test specimens. So one of the key challenge when it comes to additive manufacturing is that when we perform different qualification processes, we need to print test coupons. So normally we use ASTM, EATM coupons for performing tensile test. But for additive manufacturing, creating that big test specimens will impart more cost and more time. So we need to bring down that time and cost. So this particular standard looks for creating miniature tensile specimens or coupons that can be used for performing qualification tests. So that particular standard is currently under development. Then we have another standard guide, which is there for in situ monitoring of metal AM parts in aerospace. And again, in situ monitoring is another important area which is currently people are working on, because at this point there is no way for you to have an in-process control. So most of the time we produce the part, inspect it. If you find a defect, then we go back and tweak the parameters. So right now we have different machines which can capture those parameters or capture the process and understand what's going on during the process. But now we are moving to a stage where these in situ monitored data can be used to calibrate the process in the run itself, which means while the process is going on, we can make corrections. So these are some of the standards which are currently under development, which is very valuable for the aerospace applications. And I'm going to give you some overview about some of the standards available which can be used straight away for any of the applications. So first time I'm going to list out some of the general standards, no matter whether you work for aerospace or for any industry, but these are some of the generic standards which can be used for any industry. So to start with, we always need some document which talks about the terminology or which talks about the language that we need to speak in the industry. So previously when this technology was emerging, for example, when we talk about this powder bed fusion, we have different terminologies, like we call it as SLM, we call it as DMLS, we call it as laser QC. So there were so many names, but with this standard, we remove all those names, and now there is only one name for any metal powder additive manufacturing process, that's called a PBF, powder bed fusion in general. So all powder bed fusion technologies are called as PBF processes. So if it is laser, then the PBF is followed with a letter N. If it is an E-beam, then it is followed with a letter EB. So likewise, there are a lot of terminologies that we use quite often in the industry. And the thing is, at different parts of the world, people use different terminologies for multiple things. So we just want to make sure that the terminologies that we use are the same. So this particular standard is the most useful one for beginners as well as for experienced people, to make sure that they are using the right terminology, particularly when they write technical documents and when they write reports or any kind of proposals. Then we have to make sure that we use the right terminology. And this particular standard is the most useful one, and this is under revision right now. The next version of the standard will be coming out soon, within another 2-3 months. And this is another generic standard for design. So this will give you general guidance on the design for additive manufacturing. So we have a standard ISO ASTM 52910, and this will give you a generic idea about the requirements, guidelines, and recommendations. That's for the general design. And if you are working on laser powder bed fusion for metals, then ISO ASTM 52911, this is a standard that you should look for. And if you are working on polymer, powder fusion polymer, then it is ISO ASTM 52911. So again, this is the generic standard. It can be applied for aerospace as well as for other industry applications. Similarly for feedstock. So for feedstock also, we have few standards which is helpful for you to work on different feedstock, managing different feedstock. The first one is ASTM F3049. So this particular standard gives you different characterization methods that can be used for characterizing the metal powder. And this is applicable for both powder bed fusion as well as for directed energy deposition. And there is another standard which helps you to create specifications. So when we talk about material specifications, again, different people specify materials in different ways. And again, it also depends on the kind of industry that you're working on. For example, in the aerospace, your material specifications will be very stringent. You'll be having a tight tolerance when you specify the material property requirements. So this particular standard that will help you to identify how you can specify a particular metal powder for your application. And there is another work item currently under development, and that is mainly focused on reuse of the powder. So not most of the all the time we reuse the powder, because then only additive manufacturing becomes economical and green. So when you reuse the powder, again, you have to have some kind of mechanism in the place to make sure that all the time your specifications, or you have some check and control in place to make sure that the materials that satisfy specifications all the time. So this particular standard helps you to create different powder reuse schemas, which can be applied for your specific application. So these are some of the standards that can be used for managing your feedstock, no matter what the industry that you're working on. And coming to post-processing, again, it is an area still need to be explored further. So there are a couple of standards which helps you to come with the thermal post-processing requirement for metal additive manufacturing. So there's a standard called ASTM F3001, which can be used for performing heat treatment for additively manufactured parts. And there's another standard which talks about NDT evaluation. Then standards which are currently under development, which talks about evaluating post-processing and characterization of the AM part surfaces, because most of the time, we know additive manufactured part surfaces are not that regular. So we have to have some methods or mechanisms to test those surfaces, and then or we have to evaluate those surface conditions and things like that. So these particular standards help you in working on your post-processing methods. And most important thing is health and safety, even though we don't give much emphasis on safety most of the time, but safety is really important. I'm not saying that additive manufacturing is unsafe, but similar to any other technology, additive manufacturing also have its own safety requirements to be met. So we have a couple of standards right now focused on health and safety, which talks about how to or methods to mitigate the risk when you handle metal powders, as well as when you work with different additive manufacturing machines. So we have a standard on health and safety, and they are yet to publish. Then comes standards specific for aerospace applications. So whatever standards I was talking to you before, they were all used across different industry. But now when we talk about aerospace, as I said, aerospace is a little stringent when it comes to requirements. There are a few standards which are developed specifically for aerospace. Even though it is made for aerospace, you can still use it for other applications as well if you want to be of that level of stringent. So one of the first standard is ISO ASTM 52941. So this particular standard is on accepting your metal powder bed fusion machines. So for example, when you purchase a machine from a vendor, before you receive the machine, they need to test that machine with all aspects in their premises. So that's called your factory acceptance test. And similarly, once you receive the machine in your premises, then you have to install the machine, and you have to still check whether your machine is working as per the requirements that you set. So that is called the site acceptance test. So if you want to perform these factory acceptance test and site acceptance test, this is a standard that you can use, ISO ASTM 52941, which talks about the environmental and operation conditions like temperature, humidity, service purity, shocks and vibration, gas purity, how you are going to measure all those things, and how you qualify the machine. So what are all the tests that you need to perform in order to qualify your machine? So this is for your factory acceptance test as well as for site acceptance test. And this standard can also be used for calibrating your machine on the go. So let's say you finished a year or so, and you have to make sure that the health of your machine is still good. So you can again use this standard to verify the health condition of your machine. So this is particular. I mean, again, this is a requirement, or this standard is mainly focused towards aerospace applications, but still whoever wants their machine to be, or whoever wants to check or who want to monitor the health of your machine, you can use this particular standard. So another standard is ISO ASTM 52930. So this standard talks about different qualification levels for your process. It's installation qualification, you have operation qualification, and you have performance qualification. So when I say installation qualification, it is already included in your factory acceptance test or site acceptance test using your previous standard 52941. So in your installation qualification, you validate your equipment design, you validate the installation conditions, the operating limits of your machine, and things like that. So you challenge your machine for different different conditions, and then make sure that your machine is installed properly. So that is the installation qualification part. When it comes to operation qualification, so there you need to establish a relationship between your input variables with respect to quality of your output, quality of the output characteristics. Okay, so there also you have to check for your key process variables. Then you have to have methods to see how to control variability. If there is a variation in your process variables, then you have to optimize the process parameters. So these are some of the activities that you need to perform in your operation qualification to make sure that your process is, or your operation of the machine is qualified properly. And finally, it comes to your performance or part qualification. There you are doing your validation against the requirements of the part. So once you print the part, you have to make sure that the characteristics of the part meets the requirements. So in order to keep performance, or in order to make sure that the part or the process is qualified for its performance, you have to have production controls in place. You have to have documents like PCDs, process control documents in place. You have to have data of in-process monitoring, and so all those things need to be documented and continuously monitored. So that are the activities that falls under performance or part qualifications. And you also need to come with when you need to do a revalidation. So if everything is going perfect, it's fine. But if there is a change in your software, control software, or if you add or install additional components to the machine, you have to make sure that, or you have to see whether a revalidation is required or not. So all those things are covered in ISO ASTM 52930 standard. There's another standard again for critical applications like aerospace and medicals, ISO ASTM 52904 standard. And this standard gives you the requirements that you need to meet when you perform a process for producing a part which is to be used for applications in medical or for aerospace. So there they look for feedstock batches, the requirements for the feedstock to be controlled, like controls for powder batches, approving your suppliers. You should have a qualified vendor. You should have a feedstock specification in place, and you should have guidances on how to use the powder. So all those things comes under feedstock management. So this need to be performed if you need to create or if you need to produce a part for in critical applications. Similarly, the qualification requirements, it talks about the pre-built checks, it talks about periodic maintenance, and what are the steps you need to make sure that your machine, the process, and the part is qualified properly. So before going to print a part for an actual end-use application, you have to make sure that all those things are covered, all these requirements are met, and then only you can go and do your first article printing. Then these are some of the NDT standards which are relevant for aerospace again. So we have a guidance, ASTM E3166. It's a guide for NDT of metal additive manufactured parts for aerospace. Similarly, there is another work item currently in development that talks about standard guide for in situ monitoring of metal AM parts for aerospace. And there is another one for NDT evaluation by intentionally seeding a flaw. So that's mainly used for seeing how how the size of a flaw can affect your fatigue and fracture properties. And again, there is another standard which is almost in the stage of publication. It's a standard guideline for defect detection in metallic parts. And in addition to ASTM and the ISO, there are other organizations who are also focusing on developing standards for additive manufacturing. So one of the premier organization is SAE. So they have SAE AMS standard, and this SAE AMS standard, they have standards for 3 different pillars, primarily for aerospace. So one is for process, another one is for feedstock, and another one is for part. So I listed most of the published standards here, and they do have other published standards as well. But again, the focus is mainly on aerospace. And again, other organizations like ASME. So ASME have a standard for product definition, which means when you submit a technical package for any certification activities, you have to define the product with correct geometry or G&D, geometry and dimensioning methods. So this standard helps you to define a product that is made using additive manufacturing. And another important standard is from American Welding Society. It's called DE2021, and this standard gives you the specification for fabricating additive manufactured part using different metal additive manufacturing methods. So this is a standard which covers both portable fusion as well as DED, and this is mainly applicable for mainly for industry like maritime and things like that. So this particular standard gives an overall picture on all different processes. So now I'm shifting gears to another topic called research to standards. So we are all doing R&D at the universities. We are all doing R&D at different organizations. So, and most of the time what happens is that the research and development activities may end up in some publications or in some reports. And but those data can be used for applications like standard development as well. So I was talking about standard development with different organizations, and one of the key challenge in standard development is that standard development always takes long time. It takes 2 to 3 years. The reason being these standard development activities are done voluntarily by different experts, and most of the time there won't be enough data available which can be used to support different acceptance criteria that you're going to put in the standards. And even though those data are available with organizations, but they don't want to reveal it because they spend millions of dollars in creating it, and it is their internal IP. So that's a big challenge. And in ASTM, we realized that challenge, and we thought of doing a research focused towards standards. So we do different research on multiple requirements, but here is a concept to develop or perform research and development that can be focused towards standards so that we can expedite the standard development activity. So we can bring down the time of 3 years just to 18 months or 12 to 18 months in coming up with the standard. Because if you have a research done with enough data, that can be directly used for creating a particular standard. So keeping that in mind, ASTM created its Additive Manufacturing Center of Excellence, where it acts as a bridge between the standard development committees as well as R&D. So the R&D activities performed under AMCOE is fed to the committees, ASTM committees, to develop the standard. And all these research are focused on different themes, different R&D themes, which covers design, data, feedstock, AM processes, testing, qualification, all those things. So there's a link with all the subcommittee activities that we are doing right now, and to the different materials and processes. Now, so here you can see the research that we have done so far. So why I'm putting this particular information here is that you can see the different standard or different research titles here. So all these research titles are based on the standard gaps analyzed by America Makes and so there's something like an additive manufacturing standardization collaborative roadmap, an AMSE roadmap. So what this roadmap did was they identified different research requirements for additive manufacturing, and they came up with around 92 different gaps in standardization. And all these, out of 92, they identified 84 different gaps, needs R&D, needs research and development. So based on that, we started coming up with this R&D activity. So this is based on the requirements from the industry. So we took the requirements from the industry, and the research will be done at our AMCOE partners. So we have around 5 different partners, like this is EWI. So these are organizations in the US. So EWI in the US, and NASA and Auburn University in the US, NAR in the US, and we have MTC in the UK, and we have NAMIC in Singapore. So these are the partners for AM Center of Excellence, and all the research will be held at these different locations. But the topic for the research will come from the industry, will come from the ASTM members. So based on that topic, based on their interest, we identify top priorities and then perform the research. So far we have done more than 22 R&D projects, specifically on additive, specifically curated for standardization. And we can see some very specific topics here. For example, you can see here volume traceability, development in porosity characterization, then development of specification for managing steels, thermal tolerance test for portable fusion process parameters. So these are all very specific things which can be where research can be done and generate data, and that data can be supported for developing standard when it comes to creating an acceptance criteria, when it comes to creating a specification for different process requirements. So this is just a overview, or this is just what do you say, high level description of different topics that one can pursue research on additive manufacturing. So in summary, so we need standards. Standards are the key to regulations and for the wide adoption of the technology. And we need relevant and high quality standards that people can use for certification, and the end users can accept it as a credible document and they can rely on. And we also need researchers and people who are working in the industry to come up with these requirements for developing the standards. And most importantly, for accelerating the standard development activities, definitely we need research and development, particularly additive manufacturing is a new technology and we don't have enough historical data. We need different R&D activities to be performed, and we need to generate those data, and we need to use those data to create standards. So that's the end of this presentation, and I'm open for any questions. You can be free to ask any questions based on what I've talked so far.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rafi, for a wonderful and detailed presentation on standards. So very informative. So I personally learned many things from your talk. So now the floor is open for the questions. So I request audience to ask questions if you have. You can unmute and you can ask. Otherwise, please put your questions in the chat box. Meanwhile, Rafi, so I have kind of questions. So do you have your own setup lab or facilities? How do you get your testing done? Do you have any agencies or outsourcing? So what is the procedure? How ASTM works on that?
Okay, so that's a good question. Again, in my previous slides, it was just go to the previous slide where I talked about the AM Center of Excellence. So you can see here multiple partners: Auburn University, NASA, EWI, the MTC UK, NAR, and NAMIC. So these are the AMCOE centers. So we use these facilities. We use facility from Auburn, from NASA, and all these organizations. So all the research that we perform, it will be performed, research, testing, everything will be done.
So you are
at these organizations.
So you have a dedicated team to go there and get the testing done and report or something like that, or you?
No, there are dedicated teams there itself. So each one is a center of excellence. Auburn is a center of excellence for AMCOE, for ASTM, and all these are center of excellences for ASTM. And they have a team there, and we have an R&D head. So we have an R&D team. This R&D team work with these organizations. So our R&D team work with the team over Auburn University and NASA or all these places. And we have quarterly meetings to review the progress of all these projects. So basically, all the research and the associated activities will be done at these places.
Oh, nice. So I'm also very much curious. I'm interested to see miniature samples. So in MM level, so for AM. So is the standard out now, or it is still under progress?
The standard is still under development. So that I think for that particular standard, there was a lot of research people have done to see how you can correlate the small or miniature tensile specimen properties with the corresponding E8 specimens. So you cannot. So what they did was they printed a lot of samples at different locations, at different process parameters, at different machines, and created a significant amount of data to make sure that the tensile property that you generated from the miniature samples are similar to the tensile properties that you are generated from an ASTM E8 regular sample.
Oh,
and
nice.
The challenge here, so when you work with miniature tensile sample, the challenge here is that your wall thickness will be so thin. So when you have a small wall thickness, the influence of porosity, the influence of surface conditions, all those things matters.
Yeah.
So you cannot believe that, you cannot expect that all the miniature specimens have the same cross-sectional properties.
Correct. Even I don't know if we can maintain the uniaxial condition there. So with such a tiny sample.
Yes. So for example, you may have only just say 10 grains within that width, within the gauge section. So that is a challenge. But again, they're trying to see what would be the variability, what would be the acceptable range if there is a distribution in the tensile values.
Okay. Okay. So then I have another question. So these days I'm seeing there are so many startups in India, and they started working on developing machines. So small machines, even it's for polymers and for metals, powders. There are many startups. At least I can name few. How do they actually orient themselves towards aligning themselves towards the ASTM standards? So should they actually so even after they develop the machine, example, if they are developing machine based on LPBF, so how they themselves will check as per ASTM standard, or there will be a kind of set of committee, they will come and qualify it. So how the process goes there?
So Kishan, I think you said the two options, right? So both the options works now. So the first option is the organization they themselves use ASTM standards to make sure that their machines are internally qualified. So that's the one way of doing it. And the second thing is that some of these companies from India, they already reached out to ASTM to see whether we can qualify them based on our standards. Okay. So there are two ways. One is qualify them internally based on their own standards, not their own standards. They use ASTM standards and make sure that they follow or meet the requirements given in the ASTM standard. Okay. The second thing is you need a third-party confirmation whether they are using or whether the machines are qualified properly. Okay. So that's how ASTM or any third party can go in and verify whether the requirements that they have with their machine are in accordance with the things given in the ASTM standard.
Okay, so like NABL, some agency like this.
So NABL is an accreditation organization. So even ASTM, we have a third-party certification program. Companies like Tutsu or LR, they all have third-party certification programs. So they can come in and verify whether the machines are managed based on these particular standards. For example, ISO ASTM 52941 standard. And there's another standard called ISO ASTM 52942, which basically check the geometric capability of your machine. So all these machine manufacturers, before they send these machines out, they will make sure that these standards or the requirements in these standards are met internally. So for this question, yeah, they are doing both the options. First option, they do it internally, make sure that they are good enough. Once they are confident that they are good enough, then they approach a third-party body to come in and certify their machine.
The same applies for even powder processing, powder development,
yeah,
even all other aspects.
Yes. Okay. So, for example, for powder development, there is an AMS spec. So I think that's the only spec I know in terms of qualifying a material manufacturer, a powder manufacturer. So they can use that particular standard and say that, oh, we are in compliance with the AMS 7002, Series 7002 standard. And again, they can use a third-party certification body to ask them to come in and verify that we comply with the standard and get certified. So for all these aspects, we can do third-party audits based on the standard. So that's another purpose of this standard. So we have all these standards which can be used by a third-party organization and audit a machine manufacturer or a material manufacturer or a part manufacturer, and then certify them.
Okay, yeah. So thank you. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. First question from Pramod. How can we compare data from tests conducted from parts printed in different machines? Are there any set of guidelines? Then one connected question is, how can we integrate AM testing standards? No, there is a different question. So for the first question.
Yeah, so the question is, how can we compare the data from tests conducted from parts in different machines? Obviously, so one of the main issues with metal 3D printing is that when you use multiple machines, you cannot qualify parts printed from two different machines with the same qualification, process. So, you'll be using the same qualification process, but you cannot qualify saying that the part made by machine 1 is similar to the part made by machine 2, unless otherwise you perform tests separately for these two machines. Okay, so at this point, there is no specific guidance. The only way is to perform a round robin test. Okay, you can perform a round robin test with whatever machines that you have at different locations, and you can see the spread. For example, when we talk about the mechanical properties, and you say that the mechanical property that you're expecting for a given product is, let's say, 1100 MPa. Okay, so you can test the parts between two different machines, and you yourself can come up with a distribution saying that plus or minus 50 MPa is acceptable between 3 or 4 or 5 machines. So these are stringent requirements. These are requirements set by you. There is no specific guidance as of now from the standard point of view. But again, this is how people normally do. So you have parts in different machines. So this falls under the qualification process, not under the final part. So while we do qualification, we do qualification samples at different machines and test the qualification sample to see their results, and then compare the results across different machines and see what is the spread. If the spread is within the spec that you provided, then you can go and accept it. If it is beyond that, then you cannot accept it. So this should come from the organization. This requirement should come from the organization, and there is no specific standard which will tell you this is the spread that you should keep. They only tell you you should have a spread. The upper and lower limit of the spread is up to you to decide. It can be 1100 plus 50 and minus 50, or it can be 1100 plus 20 or minus 20. So it depends upon your application.
Yeah. So next question: how can we integrate AM testing standards, especially for miniature test specimens, to our current conventional testing standards?
I think that was the thing I was just mentioning before.
Yes, yes.
So right now, when we are creating that standard, and it has been there for more than 3 years, the creation of standard, because of a lot of tests that we were performing to make sure that the variability between these two specimens, or specimens from the conventional E8 and the miniature specimens, are acceptable. So a lot of tests are right now going on. Again, what we do is a round robin test. So we create specimens at different locations in the world. We create specimens from a machine in Singapore, create specimens from a machine in Czech Republic, create specimens from machines in the US, the same specimens, same parameters, and we perform the testing and see what is the variation. That's how then they correlate or they map the results from the miniature specimens to the actual specimens to see whether it overlaps or if there's a drastic difference. Most of the time, what they saw is that up to yield strength, there will be a correlation. But beyond yield strength, when it comes to percentage of elongation, there's a difference. And it primarily depends upon the porosity that is there in your sample. So again, as I said, for this particular question, the answer is that it is based on performing round robin test and compare it with the conventional mechanical properties.
Yeah, this is quite interesting. So let's say the machine is same manufacturer, OEM, and the material supplier also same. Let's say you are printing the same material, same component, same machine, but the only difference is the location. So still you are seeing the difference. Huh?
And not even the location, the person who handle it, the atmosphere, the conditions that you have. For example, the moisture conditions. So the humidity levels will affect your powder when you go to recycle the powder, and the way in which you recycle the powder, the number of times you recycle the powder, then the way in which you handle the powder, the way in which you store the powder, all those things matters.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
again,
Yes,
when
yes.
it comes to testing, when it comes to printing, and there will be slight variations at two different locations within the printer. For example, if you print a part at the center of the machine, center of your build plate, and if you have a part at the extreme corner of your build plate, you can expect some difference between these two specimens. So that's the reason why when we do this operation qualification, I talk about IQ, OQ, and PQ. When you do operation qualification, you challenge the machine with these parameters. You challenge the machine by going to these extremes. You print parts in the periphery, you print part at the center, and see how these differs, how the variation occurs. So all these things will be done during the qualification process of your machine. This is not done during the actual printing of your final part. This is done during the qualification of your part of your machine, and you challenge your machine with various process windows. What can go wrong, or you challenge the machine with the worst condition and the best condition, and see what would be the distribution of your parameter condition. So that's how people qualify the process, and they take that as the basis when it comes to final acceptance of the part. The second answer for this question is that we always talk about single part. We say there is a variability with single part, and now that additive manufacturing is not considered, is used as a technique for mass production. Okay, but now we cannot simply rely on one part, and we cannot just focus on certifying one part. So we have to go for certifying more parts at a time. We need to qualify more parts at a time. So the recent concept is called part family. So you choose different parts, okay, and you classify the parts into a family, which means parts having the similar characteristics. So there's a definition for part family, which is still under development. It's a standard, basically, going to come up soon. So they define a part family. What all parts can be brought under the concept of part family. So in this part family, you have a part with similar wall thickness. You have parts with similar geographical features. You have parts with similar dimensions. All those things can be considered as a part family, and then you can collectively certify all those parts. So that's the latest or new approach towards qualifying your parts, qualifying your end parts.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rafi. Now we have another question from Simpson. So what standard can be used for surface texture of AM parts?
There is again a work item currently under development. So
Okay.
we have a research currently going on analyzing the surface structure, and there is a university in UK called University of Nottingham, and so this project is done with ASTM AMCOE and the University of Nottingham to come up with a guidance document to see or to categorize different surface textures, surface conditions developed by additive manufacturing process. So mostly the as-built condition process. So yeah, there is a work item. There is a standard which is currently under development to provide guidances on and assessing the surface conditions of additively manufactured part. Good question.
Yeah. So any other questions by other audience?
Sir, this is Jayant from Amerta University.
Yeah, Dr. Jayant, please.
Sir, I have one question. Sir, we are working on FDM, sir. We are developing sensors in FDM.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of standards we need to follow? Like previously, the stencil, impact, and flexural we are using for polymer or polymer-based composite. So now, if you are accommodating this standard, so we need to change, right?
Yes. So for polymeric, again, when it comes to polymer testing, it's completely different. Or the testing of additively manufactured polymers are different from testing of conventional polymers. Primarily because you are talking about FDM. Primarily because the way in which the material is printed So you cannot simply use the conventional way of testing, because your failure will not be within the gauge, and your failure will be at some other locations. So considering that, again, there is another standard which is again under development, which helps you to test additively manufactured polymeric parts for both static as well as dynamic. It is currently under development. I think I would say within a year or so that standard should come out. Again, it's again based on the researches that they're doing. So they first perform a research on different test methods that can be applicable for polymeric PBF parts or polymeric extrusion-based parts. And so there are standards now going to come up, which will help you to perform specific tests on polymeric parts.
Thank you, sir.
There is another question in the chat box by Anuj Srivatsa. So what is the reason that most of the ASTM standards are not accessible to even research scholars?
So I would say all the ASTM standards are accessible to research scholars, but so every university, so we have a platform called Compass. So these Compass platforms are licensed by most of the universities. I would say, I think most of the universities in India. So if you go and, I don't know from which university you are from, if you go and talk to your librarian, and he can help you identify those standards. And even if it is not available in your university, the librarian can connect with another university who is having the access to Compass platform. So they can have inter-university, I think inter-university transfers of these documents. So any university who is having a subscription to this Compass platform, you should be able to download those standards. I think Dr. Keshav, you may be knowing that in all IITs, there's a facility.
Yes, in IITs we have that facility.
Yeah, so similar to that, I think I talked to a couple of other universities. They also have access to this particular platform called Compass. Only thing is they need to subscribe to the Compass platform, similar to the Springer or Elsevier. So you have to have a subscription to this Compass platform. And the advantage is that you can get more than an ASTM standard in Compass platform. You can get ASTM standards. On top of that, you can get publications from ASTM as well. So there are a few standards, there are a few journals published by ASTM. So all the purpose coming in those ASTM journals are also available in this Compass. And I think some ISO standards are also accessible through the Compass platform. So I would suggest you to reach out to your librarian and check whether you have this Compass platform. If not, if you can even connect with any other nearby university who already having this subscription. So once ASTM develop the standards, so we hand it over to this particular Compass platform. It is managed by a different entity to disseminate these standards.
So looks like that's all the questions from the
Excuse
audience.
me, sir. I
Yes.
have one question.
Yes, Shanmugh,
I'm
go ahead.
Shanmugh from IIT Palakkad. Sir, this question is in continuation to Simpson's question. So he had asked if there are any standards to surface roughness of AM parts. And in your presentation, you had also mentioned that research institutes can contribute to the standardization process by performing experiments and taking out the results related to that. So in this aspect, with respect to surface roughness of AM parts, so if we want to perform some experiments or some conditions, where can we get those data, sir? Like for these are the parameters or these are the tests to be performed, anything related to that area, can you elaborate on?
Yeah, so coming to this, a couple of things I would say here is that contributing to the standardization activity. One thing I forgot to tell you is that the membership for ASTM is free for all the students. As long as you are a student, your membership is free, which means once you join ASTM, you can also participate in different ASTM committee meetings online. If you are not able to fly down to places where these committees are happening, but still you can dial up and then join these kind of discussions, join these kind of committee meetings. So all the students who are interested to be a part of or interested to know what is happening in terms of standardization, not just for additive, but even in other cases, you can just go to the astm.org website, and there's a specific link for memberships. If you go there, select for student membership, it's absolutely free. So when I say you should join this kind of membership, means you will be exposed to what's happening in the standardization activities. So once you are a member, then you can write to these specific people who are working on these standards, because most of these data are an outcome of the research, and the data are not publicly available because of the IP issues. They don't release this data in public. But if you are involved in these standardization activities, you can always write to that particular PI who is leading this particular standardization activity and request them what kind of test method that you can use. You can also share the kind of research that you got to make sure that what you're doing is right. Because the people who are working on these areas, they're all experts, and they are working on these particular on surface condition based research for years. So that way, it will be helpful for you to understand the kind of test required, the kind of procedures that they use in performing those research. So I strongly encourage who are doing this presentation to be a member of these different committees, and as I said, it's absolutely free for students.
Thank you so much, sir.
And again, Dr. Krishnan, I can also ask you guys to submit papers for international conference. So we have a conference called ICAM, the National Conference for Additive Manufacturing. It happens every year, every November in the US. We just had one last time, and we have a specific student competition for that. So the first day of this conference is dedicated for students, for student competition. We have different streams where you can submit the papers.
Okay.
So that's another exposure for students to see what's happening in terms of. So when we talk about standard, it is not just purely writing the standards and publishing the standards. So writing the standards and publishing the standards are only the last phase. Whereas in these conferences, what they discuss is pure technical aspects on different additive manufacturing technologies, materials, and things like that. So, and every time we award 5 best papers from the students category, and sometimes we'll be getting 10 people. Like when we go for this kind of an award, the first award may be shared by 2 people. So you can expect 8 to 10 people to get these student awards. So you can plan for next year conference. And I think your accommodation and food and accommodation will be taken care by ASTM. I think travel, I think you have to take care. I think other things will be taken care by ASTM if your purpose are selected. So it's a highly competitive.
Mostly IIT, they will take care of their airfare. So this is a very good information, Dr. Rafi, what you are giving. So I think student community should make use of it. Yes.
Yeah, I can send you the link, because we started planning for the next version. That is the 2022. So it's going to happen in the first week of November.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen these student presentations in the past 2 conferences, and they're all excellent presentations. So only thing is, you should submit it a bit early, and it will go through multiple, not revisions. Like, we have a committee who review all these presentations, and we select first 20 or 25 presentations. Okay. I think it's a good opportunity for students to get exposed to what's happening internationally, and it's also a good opportunity to talk to a lot of people who are coming down there and it's not a trade show. It is not a trade show. It's purely a technical conference.
Technical discussion, yes.
Yeah. So it's called ICAM 2022. That's the next event coming up. I think I'll send you the link once we finalize the program.
Yes. Thank you. Right. Yeah. So yeah, you provided a lot of information. So I believe all research scholars or research community will feel they'll get a lot of benefit out of it. So if no more questions from the audience side, I would like to thank Dr. Rafi, first of all, for accepting our request and to spare your time in your busy schedule. So thank you, Dr. Rafi, for your wonderful, nice presentation, and hope our student community and those who work on additive manufacturing, so all those people will get benefit out of it. So on behalf of the institute and behalf of the organizing committee, I would once again thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Keshavan, for inviting me for this FPP program, and I hope you at least get some information from me. And if you need any further information, here is my email ID. You can reach out to me at krafi@astm.org. So what are possible information I have, I can share with you. And in terms of becoming an ASTM student member, I can share you the link if needed. Otherwise, you can simply go to astm.org website and sign up for your memberships.
Okay, all right then. So thank you. All right, Rafi. So
okay, thank you very much.
Right.
And,
yes.
Have a good day for everyone then. Bye-bye.
Yes. Bye. Yes. Okay, so that's all for this session. So I think you all will be getting the feedback form. Please fill the feedback form. Then so we will assemble back at 2:15. Right. So the next talk is by Professor Fani Kumar from IIT Madras on solidification microstructure and the defect formation during additive manufacturing. Yeah, so that is scheduled at 2:30 p.m. That's going to be our last talk today. So with this, we can actually close this session. I mean, so you all don't forget to give the feedback. Yes, Bharat?
Yes, sir.
You sent the whole feedback form, right?
Yes, I have shared this feedback form.
Okay. All right. So please check this. All right. So